Rockets in the house tonight. Woo! Everybody just.
What made you want to run for the board?
Okay, so my main reason for running for the board and my whole, I guess, like backing of it is that I've been one of those students who didn't quite get involved in their first year. Yes, I was involved in the union, in like some clubs and societies, but I just didn't see the relevance of it to me. I have a lot of friends like that as well, who still don't see the relevance of the union to themselves. But having, I guess, been so immersed in it last year especially, it showed me what it does for students. It is the whole student life, the student experience. And yeah, I want everyone to realise that and actually want to be involved in it. So yeah, that's my whole backing up.
Sure. Did you want to speak to your brand at all? I think you've made some of the most bold aesthetic decisions of anyone on the trail, eschewing a lot of like entrenched advice and conventional wisdom. So if you want to speak to that,
I would love to actually. So having studied design last year, so I was an architecture student last year, I thought I would bring a bit of my skills to the campaign trail. Yes, so as of past years, people run on bright colours with a recognisable logo, with a nice funny pun or slogan. I was like, I'm going to stay true to myself. I generally don't like bright colours. They don't really suit my skin tone. And yeah, my whole aesthetic is black and white usually.
Cool.
People know me as that. So I was like, I want white with a black logo. With my slogan, really couldn't think of anything that rhymed with Atia. And well, now people have like told me pizzeria, diarrhea. I was like, look, I don't know how I could kind of work with that, but
oh god, yeah.
But I was like, look, I think I'm just gonna stick with my name. It is a unique name. I give props to my parents for, you know, pulling it from the back of their head. But yeah, so I kind of just went with that. The geometric shape. So I'm really into 80s typography. So that's where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with my social media. I bought these excellent white shoes. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to show the camera?
By all means.
Yeah. But yeah, pretty much that's my whole aesthetic of the campaign.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are you a member of any political groups or political groups on campus particularly?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
So I'm aligned with Labour Right,
Mm-hmm.
so as some people know it as Student Unity. And the reason why I'm involved with them is because they believe in unionism and specifically student unionism. So I actually joined last year, so not my first year. And I did get informed before I chose. I was here for a year. I did see all the happenings. And yeah, I just thought that was where I think I fit in the best. And through that, I've also gotten to go to EdCon, NatCon, so Education Conference, and National Conference for the National Union of Students, and gotten to see how other students run their student union as well. So it's been very good.
Cool. So much as unity answers the question to an extent, how would you describe your political views?
Well, I'm a Labour member,
Mm-hmm.
Labour Right. That's kind of where everything that Labour Right stands for. Not everything actually, do I necessarily believe in, but that is where most of my political alignment kind of stands as well.
What are the disagreements?
Look, refugee policy, sometimes I'm a little bit apprehensive
That's
to kind of make an alignment with them.
Yeah.
But my biggest thing though with Labour Right is that they aren't binding.
Right.
They are very understandable, and both in and out of campus they're more than open to ideas, suggestions and debate.
Cool.
And that's why I am still part of the party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you were elected to a position, would you feel bound by caucus either formally or informally?
No, not at all. So for anyone that actually really knows me, when I first got involved in student politics, I guess my first kind of touch of it was on Liam's campaign last year. So he is now part of Grassroots. So everyone does understand that I'm very much I'm not going to let anyone make me their puppet, pretty much, right? Yeah, so that's kind of, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And so on the political spectrum of the other candidates,
Yeah.
who do you think you feel the closest to or align the most with?
Ooh, in all honesty, maybe Tiff Alexander. She seems to have a lot of the same ideologies as me. Potentially Jack as well, and Shannon.
Cool. I mean, this kind of leads into the same question.
Yeah.
You may not have thought about it yet, but if you have, do you know how you're going to be doing preferences?
I haven't thought about that yet. I've had a few people talk to me about it, but
Want to throw one at the bus for us?
No, we'll keep that for later. But no, right now it's not the first thing on my head.
Is that something that the caucus has a hand in?
Yes, but it is going to be my decision in the end.
Good.
So, yeah.
Cool. So, looking kind of forward and idealistically forward to, in the event that you were elected, the executive elections for the current board and for potentially yourself, if you're bold enough to put your hand up, and it's not unprecedented, but of the current directors, some names are known to be going for the presidency vaguely. Yeah. Do you know which way you'd vote in the event?
Yep. So, I have also heard who is kind of like putting the names out there and whatever else.
For clarity's sake, it's, as I understand, Ed McMahon, Liv Ronan, and Alicia.
Yep. And that's how I understood it too. So, out of those three, if I was to vote, I would be voting for Alicia. For personal reasons, because as I said, when I got involved, she was actually one of the people that kind of mentored me through all of this. She has been a strong woman who I look up to, but also she was there to help me throughout so much. When I ran Funch last year, she would do little things like help me set up. She was the past campus culture director before me. So yeah, little things like that, but she's also just a very strong unionist, and she also has done a lot for the USU so far. So I think she deserves it.
For clarity's sake, Alicia was the campus culture director for a few months of 2014.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she had to give it up because of USU.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So, one of the current contentious issues around the board structure is the place of Senate-appointed directors.
Yeah.
How do you feel broadly about the relationship between student and non-student power brokers?
So in all honesty, I think that the union, like if you've got 11 student directors who have been voted in by the students, that's what it should be.
Right.
It is a student-run organisation, as we like to say, but if you've got two people who aren't necessarily voted in by the students, I'm a little bit iffy about that. I haven't seen too much like that they've done, which is horrible, but I also sometimes don't see their place in the union. So yeah, kind of have to hear both sides of it as well, because a little bit on the fence about it. If that makes sense.
By extension,
yeah.
They hold an important position in the negotiations for the executive committee on the board. At this time last year, a lot of current members who are considering executive positions said that they wouldn't court the vote of Senate-appointed directors, mostly because they take the same stance that you and plenty of other candidates have, which is that they don't quite understand their place on the board.
Yeah.
If you were to run for an executive position, could you conclusively say whether or not you would go looking for the support of Senate-appointed directors?
I probably wouldn't, because, as I said, and as you said as well, I just don't really see their place in it.
Yeah.
But in saying that, them being there as well, you do need to ensure that they aren't being, I don't know, I guess, I don't know the right words to say this, but I guess they're voting the right way.
Yeah, right.
But myself, I probably wouldn't go up to them and ask them for their vote.
Sure.
But I would hope to know they know what I'm about, at least.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, yeah.
So, under what circumstances do you think it would be appropriate, or is appropriate, for you to breach your duty to the board for the greater good?
Okay, so I don't think there's any situation right now that I can think of that I would want to breach my obligations to the board. But if it was in the best interest of the majority of students, then I would, it's really hard and fine line, in all honesty. And, you know, obviously there's obligations. You've got a fiduciary duty, as repeated by Tara many times. But yeah, no, it's very much a fine line. It's very situational. It's very contentious. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. Can't really give you a clear answer there. I'm sorry, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, perhaps I'll clarify it somewhat. So there was obviously over last Germany before the story surrounding that was Tom Rowie and his decision to disclose some information that the board didn't want disclosed. In that situation, do you think that, or were you in that situation, would you have made the decision he made first? And secondly, as someone voting, would you have voted to vote him off, or would you have voted to keep him on the board?
Okay. So, as I said this in my Surge interview as well, I wasn't actually very involved at that point, so I'm obviously going off about what you guys are saying. I don't think I would have done what he did. In terms of voting, I'm still not 100% sure what happened there. So, as I said, yes, you know, I wasn't really involved at that point. So, if you want to clarify, like, how people kind of voted and what the vote was actually for.
Yeah. So, broadly, do you think it's worth dwelling here or not? I think probably.
I'm
yeah.
happy. Yeah.
So
If it's boring, we can cut it.
and I should disclose here that I was reasonably involved in helping the campaign to keep Tom on.
Yeah.
Broadly, what it came down to was the union in human resources interviews discovered information that contradicted the university's public record statements about involvement of police on campus and in protests on campus.
Yeah.
And what Tom did was disclose part of one of those internal HR reports, basically just the part disclosing that police were on campus, to Honi, which then published it. And he was, the push to get him off the board was because he allegedly disclosed confidential information and they claimed breached his fiduciary duty. The countervailing story was that he was standing up for an interest of students directly by obviously stopping them from the university from lying about what they were doing, and so people believed that he was fulfilling, it was basically a competition of two duties, whether he owed a strict duty to the union or a duty more broadly to student interests as he considered them.
Okay.
And so the question really is, if you want the simplest version, perhaps it's easier to escape it from that narrative, is do you think that board directors have a greater obligation to the institution or a greater obligation to students?
It's probably a really hard one because, you know, you are essentially, you are on the board of the USU. That is who you are. But clearly the USU is for students and that is like the hub of it. I'm just going to say that me personally, I would put my fiduciary duty above that. But I would do everything in my right or whatever else to ensure that students, I don't know, were kind of, to help students in some way or like inform them somehow, just not breaching the confidentiality of those papers, I guess. Which I know is obviously very hard and probably just me making something up in my head. But
no, obviously it's a difficult question.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't, you're not coming into this fully, which is fine. And I guess the other thing is that obviously, to an extent, by abiding by your fiduciary duties, you are at least notionally also abiding by a broader duty to students. The fiduciary, if the union is a functional organisation, then playing to its interests ought to be by extension playing to student interests.
And that, I mean, that actually is a very interesting philosophical and legal point about the way companies are run there that we get into now. But how do really work in a student organisation? But look, maybe let's deal with things that you probably have a grapple on, and that's your implementation of your policies. So I'm going to maybe go through a few of them and just see how they work out. So Surge FM, which is good. I mean, you obviously want to get a frequency for Surge FM.
I do.
I personally find it interesting. I used to have a radio show.
What show?
Cool. It's down in Wollongong, not up here.
Okay.
But we know that in the past,
Yeah.
Surge FM did have a frequency and lost it.
Yeah.
How do you see it going about getting a frequency allocated?
Okay, so I've actually been involved in Surge for the past 2 years, and we've been looking into this as well. It is going to be very hard, and I'm not going to lie about that. When we did have a frequency, it was only for 4 weeks of the year. What I'm thinking of is having a full-time frequency as well, which is going to be much harder. I'm not going to lie about that either. But the benefits are immense. I also volunteer down at FBI. Community radio, it does amazing things for the community, especially for the student community. Like the potential for us to be known as, you know, a contender in the radio industry is so cool. But the way that I kind of see about going about this is that we do need to change a lot in Surge. So it'd be something that we have to work closely with Surge to do. There's legal things such as making sure people don't swear too much, that content is good, and also the cost of it. It is going to be expensive, but as I said, it's an investment. Things such as our media degrees would have so much more, I guess, credibility if you have, you know, a media point for students to get involved in, which is actually broadcast rather than having an online frequency, which we do. That's kind of where I'm going about with it. Obviously, if I get on board, I will be working with other board directors, 10 other board directors, so it can't just be my idea. I need to have input with everyone else and whatever else to make it happen. And yeah, it is not a one-person job.
As I understand, we were banned from having a frequency? I don't know what the exact...
yeah, so we were banned for, I think it was 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Those 2 years have now passed.
Okay.
So it is completely possible for us to reapply.
I think, so maybe some more on mechanics, unless we want to,
No,
how
sure.
policy is going to operate. So you were talking a little bit, at least I thought I read something somewhere about more involvement with satellite campuses.
Yes.
Is that right? How do you see that working?
Okay, so there are a few things that I kind of want to happen with satellite campuses. So having been a part of the USU last year through Funch, that was an amazing opportunity for myself to grow as a person, to understand the union, and to see its benefits for students. A lot of students at satellite campuses just don't see the relevance of the union to them. I want to firstly see more leadership opportunities for satellite campus students. And I'm not sure what these positions yet would be. I obviously want to test out the waters and see what they want. And yeah, so pretty much that is my main goal, first of all. My second thing kind of ties in with one of my other policies right now. It's the USU Music and Arts Festival. And this is specifically, I guess, to the SCA and to the con. So we have amazing talent at the university on this campus, but also on other campuses as well, like, yeah, the con and SCA. So with that, with my USU Music and Arts Festival, I want to see a portion of those performers actually be Sydney students, no matter what genre they play in. And with art, I want stage props and stage designs and whatever else to be also designed by students of USU. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that.
Cool. Do you mind if I dwell on that one in particular?
Yeah, and I might as well.
Sure.
But you go first.
At the moment, the union has the Verge Festival.
Yes.
It is, broadly speaking, the arts festival that
Yeah.
the union provides.
Yeah.
Before trying to create a festival anew, is there a way that you can see Verge being either reformed or extended to include those groups out at the satellite campuses, which they do genuinely have a lot to offer?
Yeah.
Especially for something like Verge, it's almost self-evident.
Yeah. Yeah, so is this just like, I didn't quite understand your question, did you?
Would you like to change Verge before trying to build something new?
Okay, so having also, once again, coming back to working with the USU last year, I saw Toe and Kate put together a brilliant Verge festival. I think Verge is great as it is. What I'm trying to bring though is kind of something different, and it is a more one-day festival, kind of like music festival kind of thing. So I'm thinking more of the lines of Laneway and Outside In, if you guys are familiar with those. Yeah, so pretty much something like that where students can get involved. With Verge, I think it can be extended out to other campuses, like our satellite campuses, to engage them more. it has been trying to do that. I think last year they did try to do that. I know the current Verbs directors this year. I know one of them very well, and she's also trying to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I guess as a board director, it would be weird to say you need to make a certain portion of your festival, you know, from satellite campuses. But I would like, you know, there to be some, like, a more push towards there.
Sure.
So yeah.
Cool.
So on satellite campuses, even more, how do you see implementing new things working in campuses that already have their own student union? So particularly Cumberland has the Cumberland Student Guild.
Yeah.
How do you see negotiating that relationship?
So my policies when I talk about satellite campuses aren't necessarily in like relation to Cumberland campus because of the Student Guild. But as I hear it right now, the Guild is not kind of going so well. We'll have to see what happens over the past few, like, months, maybe year, whatever happens. But if the Guild was to lapse and the USU then would go back there, then I would have, like, I would love to get them more involved. Not sure in what way yet, but I've got a lot of health policy, and I would love to maybe like implement something like, you know, first aid courses and whatever else, which are very relevant to degrees over there. So yeah, something like that, maybe small steps, as I say.
Yeah.
Another thing worth bearing in mind with the Cumberland Student Guild and campus more broadly is the fact that Cumberland will be reintegrated with Sydney by, what's the date? Is it 2017? I think
I'm sure it will change anyway in the next year.
Yeah, right. Are there any proactive steps you'd like to see the union taking to accommodate what will be a very significant number of students coming in to the union, especially given that they've previously been isolated almost by interest? Like, what sort of steps should we be taking to accommodate imminent Cumberland students or ex-Cumberland students however many years off?
I haven't thought too much about this, in all honesty, so I can't give you great answers, but if I was to sit down and think about it, I would try my best interest to get them involved in any way possible. I know that obviously, well, I wanted to actually study physiotherapy when I was coming out of high school, and I know the interests are different, but now having studied arts, you know, they're not different from anyone else. So they're not these weird people on a different campus. They have the same interests, and you don't have to make everything, you know, sport related. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, maybe let's jump out of policies. It's a bit of a mire. And instead move here. Do you think, would you take a position on the board if elected through affirmative action?
Yes, because affirmative action exists to make sure that there is proper representation for women.
Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. I would like to get up on my own merit, and I would love to see, you know, more women get up on the board than just 3. But if that does happen, I would.
and in a similar vein, where do you stand on autonomous positions?
I believe autonomous positions should be autonomous. So, you know, ethnocultural should be an ethnocultural person. Women's should be someone who identifies as a woman. Yeah, if that answers it.
Yeah. What do you think the most important USU program is, and why?
There's merit to all the programs, in all honesty. I really like a new program which is being run, Radical Sex and Consent Week. So BB is the header of that. It ties in with a lot of what I believe in, as I'm running on free sexual health checkups, and I want to make things like sex conversational, and I think she's already started that with that. My other thing is Health and Wellbeing Week as well. Like, those two kind of speak to me because that is what I am all about. But yeah, other than that, I think a lot of the programs do have their own merit, and it's kind of hard to put them against each other because their merits lie in different areas.
Okay. And so I guess staying in USU programs, how do you think your experience working with Funch or with other things has contributed to your understanding of the board?
Well, firstly, as I said before, my first year, I wasn't very clear about what the USU actually kind of did. Yes, I was involved in clubs and societies, but I was like, okay, don't actually know what's kind of going on. My second year, having run Funch, everything was clear. Working with the different departments, you know, just general, like, knowledge of, I guess, even, like, social media, for example. Like, I never knew the backing of, like, the USU's ideas of social media, through to what it was about. Like, Funch was about getting students involved and giving them back something for having an access card. Yeah, little things like that are so much more clear now.
Okay. And so, talking a bit about your experience last year, at the end of last year, you nominated or went for a position as Environment Officer of the SRC.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to do that, particularly obviously now that you've resigned from that position?
Okay, so this is a great and funny story. So I actually didn't put myself up for it. It was a weird issue. Having spoken to the Environmental Collective after that, everything is good now, and I gave it up because I said to them, if someone is going to do the job better, has a passion for it more than I do, by all means, here you go. And that was the end of that.
Okay, so what do you mean by didn't put yourself up for it in the first place?
So someone else had decided that I was going to run for that position. It was in the interest of their own politics, and I was very unhappy about it. Voiced that to a lot of people. I also made sure that the Environmental Collective and members of Grassroots who were actually very sad about it knew that. But it's all been sorted now.
Right. and for further clarity, and I know it's probably a rough point, but was the person who put you up for it somebody from your faction?
No, it was the one person was kind of like, it was a whole bunch of people who decided this is what is going to happen, and that person was like, hey, this is what you're going to, if you're happy with it, you're going to do. I didn't quite understand the whole thing that was going on, so yeah, after I did understand what was happening, I wasn't so happy about it.
But it arose from factional politics
So.
and being bound to... Yeah, that's...
There was no binding.
Oh, okay.
It was, as I said, I just didn't quite understand it.
Sure.
And then once I was clear about what was going on, yeah.
I mean, we'll stay with the SRC, but maybe take up the personal focus.
Yeah.
What do you think which institution do you think does more for student welfare, the SRC or the union, and how do you see their roles being different?
Well, I personally see the SRC as the main welfare body on campus, because I guess in terms of when students need help in those other aspects of life, that is where they go to. I've personally had help from the SRC because the union didn't provide that help. But in saying that, they work, you know, to get like, hand in hand, sort of. I see the USU in terms of welfare raising awareness, whereas I see the SRC doing the work, if that makes sense.
So speaking in light of that view of the board
Yeah.
and of the union as raising awareness, do you think there are any particular policy achievements or policy failures of the current set of board directors or a recent set of board directors, or more broadly, the union as an institution?
I'm kind of going off the past year because, as I said, I haven't been too involved before that. Past year has been really good, as I see it. Transparency and whatever else has been increased in the union so much more. And I'm very happy with a lot of the policies that have been implemented by the current board. So yeah, I'm quite happy with it and don't see anything bad about it. Can't comment on like things before my time, but yeah.
There are a couple of questions about transparency
Yeah.
that we've posed to all candidates.
Yeah.
I guess the most relevant, given what you've just talked about, is whether or not you would support the full divulgence of financial details of board director expenditure.
Yep. As in, like, would I... Do you want to phrase that in a way?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
Would you support the just the yeah.
So expenses.
Would you support that?
Shall I? Or
yeah, no, please do.
So expenses of directors being public. So for
Yeah.
instance, how many times they're using their cab charge being published, what they're doing with their meal allowance, etc.
I would be more than happy for that to happen. I think as a board director, you're accountable for everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
You are there to represent the students, and they have every right to know what you're up to, I guess. Yeah. So if that was me as a board director, I'd be more than happy to divulge that information about myself. And I think other board directors should see it like that as well.
Yeah, so do you think other board or it should be a norm for board directors to do that?
I think it should.
Yeah.
I would be happy with that idea. I haven't heard that idea like floating around yet, but yeah, go on.
What about the CEO? Do you think it's appropriate to discuss the remuneration of the CEO and bonuses of the CEO in camera, or should that be a discussion that's had with the membership of the union?
Remuneration.
It's a pretty bad question, particularly for those who aren't across what in camera means.
Basically, do you think that? Do you want to rephrase it?
Oh, should we be openly discussing CEO pay? Should that be immediately accessible to the members of the union? Because as it stands, it's not possible for us. Yeah.
It should.
Yeah.
I mean, he is being paid by students' money. Not to say that he's doing a bad job or anything like that, but I do think it should be a discussion that we have, and the membership should have a say in it. So, yeah, did that answer it?
Yeah, that answers it. Speaking of which, I mean, how do you think currently the power balance stands on the union? On the union. So there's often complaints are made that the CEO or other managerial staff have quite a lot of power in the union, as opposed to board directors, or that the Senate appointed directors have a lot of power in the union.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a problem with how that balance of power lies, or do you think that balance of power is all right the way it is?
I personally, I'm not quite sure how. Obviously, having not been directly involved in that kind of thing right now, it is a little bit hard to say how the power is distributed, because obviously you and I are just going off what other people are saying. But if that were to be the case, I think you know, in the end, board directors should have the end say in a lot of things, because they're the ones that have been, you know, elected by the students who you're essentially representing.
Okay, excellent. I think that's...
Yeah. Paul? You should jump down to other? Sure. Okay. We sort of covered the first one, but the pointy question is, if you had to cut $1 million of union expenditure, where would you make the cuts and why?
I'm not quite sure. It's a bit hard. If it were to be possible, I would probably just try and cut a little bit from everything so that it's fair. I don't think that, I'm not personally aware where money is kind of divided right now. That is something that I would be researching if I were to be on board.
Sure.
But yeah, potentially, not even sure, sorry.
Speaking of potential cuts, there are rumours, and regardless of their veracity, that the union is looking to get rid of the CNS committee and streamline clubs and societies' approval directly through the board. Do you think the board has a role in politically motivated intervention in the establishment of societies?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the particular example is BroSoc, or the most recent example, and before that, Life Choices, where it was a political intervention on the part of the board to stop what they saw as an inappropriate society being formed on campus.
Or of course with Life Choice, it's the opposite, a choice.
Yes.
Not to intervene.
Yes, right.
Okay. I think if it is inappropriate and harmful to the student experience and student life, then there should be some intervention. But in saying that, students do have a right to do what they want, and I mean, you know, what's in saying that these bunch of students can have a society but you can't. My whole thing is that if it is harmful to the student experience, then of course I don't want other students to be at risk of, you know, feeling as though they're uncomfortable or having that on campus. Yeah.
We'll sort of end things in a roundabout way.
No worries.
So we talked a little bit earlier about policies.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a quagmire, but you seemed reasonably across all of them. So, and you've probably seen previous board directors promise the world and achieve very little of it. Are you willing to admit that you may not achieve some of the policies you have?
Possibly, yes. Obviously, I will try as hard as I can to implement every single one of my policies over the next 2 years if I was to be elected. But the thing is, I've thought about my policies and how implementable they are. I've done my research into a lot of them, and I think it is completely possible for me to implement all of them. Now, in saying that, as I mentioned before, I won't be running the board by myself if I was to be elected. There are going to be 10 other people, and it is input from them as well, and so things might change. The way I envision something might not happen exactly that way. So, but behind every one of my policies is a broader idea, and that is what's going to drive me. And as long as those ideas are kind of happening, then I would be more than happy, and I could kind of say that yes, I did achieve what I wanted to, and it wasn't necessarily implementing my own policy, but it was doing what I essentially wanted to do.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say broader idea? Do you mean eat, sleep, rave, repeat, or do you mean...
all that, but no, but also, okay, so for example, my sexual health policy. So that is free sexual health checkups, and I'm not just saying, oh yeah, free sexual health checkups for everyone. My broader idea in that sense is to make sex conversational, to make sexual health conversational, because as I see it now, the union doesn't do that. As I mentioned before, we are stepping towards that. But yeah, so the backing of it is just to make sex and sexual health a bigger thing. If I couldn't implement free sexual health checkups, I would find a different way to make that happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. And we'll stay there, and I know this is probably the least fun part, but I mean,
Okay.
do you have any kind of hierarchy of your policies? Do you have one policy to rule them all, so to speak?
Not necessarily. I have a few that I would really like to see happening as soon as possible if I was to be elected, but you know, all my policies are there because I have faith in all of them, and I want all of them to be happening. And as I said, the backbone of each one of them to be what the union is going to strive for. Sorry.
I'm surprised the desk hasn't fallen on us yet. What do you mean when you say you have a few that you really want to see implemented? Do you care to share?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this so many times before, my sexual health one is my biggest one. Maybe the other thing that I actually am quite passionate about is the careers guides and industry nights. So having studied architecture last year, this kind of stemmed from that. The reason why I kind of chose to come back to arts was because I didn't see job opportunities in architecture, and I didn't see the union doing enough to help students, especially in architecture, to feel comfortable in the job prospects after they graduate. Those are kind of little things that I am quite passionate about. I do have a lot of friends who are still studying architecture who are worried, you know, and I don't want them to be worried. I want them to be sailing through their degree, loving what they're doing, but also knowing that the USU has their back. So yeah.